This one is actually coming straight from the heart, pun intended, because all of the sounds in this little musical idea were made from the sound of my heart. Just to let you know what's going on with me, over the last few months I've had some more episodes of some heart palpitations, and basically I have what's called atrial fibrillation, and so I'm on medication for it now, and it's getting it under control, and then soon I will have a procedure where they will go in and fix this part of my heart that is misfiring. So needless to say, it's been a stressful few months for me, and things just got a whole lot more stressful in the last week, as everybody knows, and didn't have it in me to make videos for some new things like the new Cubase that just came out, and then also for an effect that just came out from Arturia called Fragments. Really cool effect. And so what I'm going to do today is just show you how I made this little idea out of the sound of my heart when I got an echocardiogram. So I'll break down all the things I used to create the different sounds. We'll go over some of the sound design things. And in future videos, I will show you more about the new Cubase 12 features, because I gotta say, they're really great. So let me show you how this one all started. I was sitting on my side getting my echocardiogram, and I said, hey, can I record this? Because I make music on a YouTube channel, and I think this would be a lot of fun. And I did actually do this. This is the second time I've made a song out of a heartbeat from what's like an ultrasound. And I did that with our first child. So I recorded the sound of my daughter's heartbeats. This was a long time ago. And then started that as the basis of a song for her. It's really cheesy, but it was a neat experience. So this is my own heart, and much less fun getting your heart checked for a problem than listening to the sound of a baby's heartbeat, let me tell you. So there's the sound of my heart. Found a spot that sounded pretty good, looped it over, and then I took that sound, that audio, as the basis of all of the other sounds, the drums, the pads, and everything. So new Cubase 12, here it is. And there really isn't much that you're going to notice right when you first look at it. In fact, I can't think of anything that I've noticed, other than in this lower zone, you have a new thing called MIDI Remote. And this is a really incredible new feature. There's lots of videos on it. And I just went and made a really rough attempt at something here for the Complete Control S61. And so I've got it set up. So I've got my volume on the first encoder, my panning on the second encoder, and the third encoder is this ability to put your mouse over top of something, and then automatically it shows up as the focus on this knob. So I just go turn on this EQ and mouse over each control, and then I can be adjusting it, right? So mouse over this, the Q factor, and then go move the decibels, whatever I want. And that one is actually called the AI knob. Really impressive new feature of Cubase 12. And as you know, my platform right now is the usage of hardware to make this whole process more creative, more hands-on, and having this stuff just sitting there all the time. It's like, why not just have all of these knobs mapped out to something in Cubase so that I could very conveniently go and change these things. So one of the first things I did was take a little blip of the sound. So I took those little chunks out of, took that sound and dragged it into a program called Backbone, which is this processing plugin, I guess you could say, by Steinberg. And with this plugin, what you can do is you can separate sound into periodic sound, so sound that repeats in a frequency, so we perceive that as a frequency or a tone, and then random sounds, so percussiveness, percussive hits that only happen once in a sound. So you split sound apart into its elements, and then you can mess with either of those separately. So I can take this guy right here, and I can separate the click sound from anything that's kind of tonal, which isn't much in this little tiny short sound. If I just mess with the sensitivity here, there's the tonal element, and there's the noise element, and then I hit apply, and those two sounds get separated down below. So now I can mess with that separate from that, which is really neat, because I can then go to this one right here, and I can say, okay, this one, I don't want that part of the sound to change with the keyboard. So I'd go over to the pitch page here, take off the key follow, and now that sound is not changing with the pitch, but this one is. Does that make sense? So that's how I ended up coming up with a pitched bass drum sound. You can also go into this resynthesis engine here. And so right now I'm messing with the tonal element. So let's just play around with that a little bit. So now I'm kind of messing with the upper frequencies, the formant, the harmonic content of this sound. And I just kept playing around with these controls until I got something that I liked. You can also add pitch envelopes to sounds, which is part of percussive sounds, part of the synthesis of percussive sounds and drums and things like that. We've got filters in here, really complex filters. And then the last page is the amplifier module, which you can go and mess with the attack and the decay in that of the sounds. And so that was where I got the kick. And I also set that so that it was pitched to the key of this little idea. And once I finished messing with those samples, I dragged them onto Groove Agent so I could just play them. So that was my kick and my snare. And then I went and started messing around with this new plugin called Fragments by Arturia. And I'll show you what it sounded like without fragments on there. And this is a granular synthesis effect. So what that means is it's going to process sound as it's coming in real time. And as sound is coming in, it's going to break that sound temporarily up into a whole bunch of little fragments and then give you control over how the sound comes out of this effect. It's quite incredible and ended up making all sorts of really interesting sounds for me as a sound design thing. But then I also used it later on, as we'll see, on some of the patches to create these otherworldly synthesis type sounds. I loaded up one of the presets, which was Step in Time. And if we click on the Advanced tab here, these ones look very similar to Pigments. And that's what I love about this Arturia software is once you start to learn one of their programs, you can then open up a whole bunch of other ones and start to make sense of what's happening. So really incredible piece of software. I'd love to do a video on this one in the future. Charlie has an incredible video on Fragments on the Arturia channel on YouTube. So let's have a listen to what my audio sounded like when I put it through this thing. I ended up getting some really great percussive sounds. So then what I did is I put that effect on, and then I bounced it down to an audio file. So I took that audio file, and then I made a sampler track, so a Cubase sampler track. So we'll just take that chunk of audio, drag it down onto the sampler track. I've got a video on the sampler track. Make sure you watch that. And I'll put a link to that in the description. And then you go over to Slice. You can change the speed and the format of audio now, and then go and slice it, which you couldn't do before, which is incredible. I'm just going to slice this. So I just went through the different slices, found the sounds that I liked, and then I just played those on the keyboard. And then I turned that into an audio file and resliced it. My sampler that had just the sounds that I liked, that I made right here, put the slice markers on there, and then press this little button right here, and it chucks those slices up to Groove Agent. So here we got some really interesting drum kit sounds now with some reverb on there, and all from that one sound of my heart going through that funky effect. And then the hi-hats that were just little tiny short sounds, and maybe some of them I pitched them up just a little bit higher so that they became kind of a hi-hat like sound. And then as far as the instrument itself goes, I went into Backbone and I stretched out the sound with that resynthesis option, stretched this sound out until it became this. So it's stretching it so far out and trying to create a sound out of a very short little sample. And then what I did is took that growly sound and put it into Pigments. So I'm going to load up a new patch here, set it to sampler, and then I'm going to go load that sample. So I go over to folder, and then I've already found that folder. So we're going to go to this one right here. And I thought, okay, we've got something kind of synth-like in here. And then, of course, in Pigments, we've got the ability to turn on granular synthesis on your samples. Which sounds, you know, kind of useless at this point, but it allows me to hold down a note and just keep playing. Next thing I did is I went over to the filters and I chose the comb filter. I can't remember if this one's new. I think it's new in the latest update. Isn't that cool? So the comb filter, you can see that it's pushing up frequencies. These are harmonics. So by putting on this comb filter and pushing up those frequencies, we end up getting a pitched sound. Next thing I did with that is I went over to the envelope, played with the envelope so I had a bit more of a release. And then we can play with things like this damping right here. I think for the bass, all I did was took the exact same sound and played with this frequency control. So you could argue that there's nothing close to my heart left in a lot of these sounds, but it started with my heart. Okay, so I played around with this a whole bunch. What I sometimes did is played it just as a Pigments patch. And then in other cases, I exported just one note and then brought that into the sampler track in Cubase. And then I was able to, if I didn't like the way the attack was working really well on that one, then I was able to go here and start in the middle of the sample. So that's exactly what I'm doing right here. And it looks like I used the filter a little bit on this one as well. The first 2 hours was spent feeling like I was not really going to get anything. And eventually stuff started to happen. So let's have a listen to the different sounds that I've got in here. I've got the glitch kit I already showed you. I've got the main heartbeat. I've got the kick and the snare, which were made in backbeat. And then I've got my first pad sound, which is this one right here. And then I've got another one which was related. And that one was made by putting on Fragments. And this is the default patch that pops up when you open up Fragments. And it's a beautiful sound. So it was really smart for them to use this one as the default. It's called Ocean Sweep. And so without the effect, with the effect, and so you can see that sound keeps going into this little buffer and it's picking up the sound, and then it's all the yellow lines are the little fragments or the little bits of the sound that it's using at that moment. It means that you can get granular synthesis on anything from voice, from your own voice, from a vocal track in real time as it's going through. So it's very different from a granular synthesis. But I did find myself at some points going, okay, I like the sound that I'm getting, but remember it's coming in after the sound. So it's not like a synthesizer. And so in those cases, what I did is I put the sound through Fragments and then just took one note and dragged that onto a sampler track in Cubase. And then I was able to play it and have the sound start immediately by pushing where I started that sample. That's like kind of what I did on the bass there. This one here is a sampler track that is going through Fragments as well. And this patch is called Responsive Reverses. If I turn off Fragments, I've got a lead sound, which is one of the Pigments patches, just going through Pigments. And this one is using that comb filter as well, but it's using a different sample. So I chucked a different sample from my heart into that one to create that patch, but still using this comb filter trick. So that one really gave me the tonal elements I needed for the song. So that was kind of my cheat for getting tonal sounds. Here's another one. This might be my favorite sound. And what I did for this one is I used an Arturia effect called Rev Intensity. And this one's a really neat reverb, digital reverb. This one has some beautiful patches. All I did was load one on there, and it's got this rhythmic thing. Let's turn it off. And then the last one is my hi-hats. So let's just make one little lead sound to play around with here. And I think what we'll do is we'll take it from this pulsing sixths one, actually. I'm gonna go duplicate tracks, and I'm gonna take off the rev intensity, get rid of the information. We'll call this lead, and then let's see what we've got. And you can see in the sampler track, I added a loop. So this sound just wasn't long enough. If I turn off the looping, you'll see how short it is. That's it. So I went to the looping functionality here, and I just said alternate. So it's just gonna go back and forth. And you can see that this right here sets the fades between jumping back and forth. And then I've got a filter on there as well, a pretty intense filter, because the sound from that comb filter thing was just a little too buzzy. So let's go look at the filter. So here I turn the filter back on, and maybe we'll get it. That sounds pretty good. Let's set it to monophonic mode. And then now if I press this little button right here, legato mode, it means we're not going to get that attack every time, which would be nice for some faster stuff. And then let's set the glide, the portamento. I've got it a little faster so I can do some runs. And then if I go over to this little PB, I'm going to set my pitch bend to be a full octave. I'm just gonna play a little synth line in here, made from my heart. Here we go.